Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining my session. Let me just do a quick word of introduction. My name is Gosia Formanek, and I'm a founder of Fena. Fena is an open banking power SaaS platform, and we help SMEs to manage the inventory, products, suppliers, customers, and payments in one platform. And we also help them making the payments faster, easier, and cheaper. And today in my presentation, I would like to explore how standardized and well-structured APIs with great legal foundation can help unlock opportunities for fintech startups and beyond as well for the entire financial ecosystem to build great technical solutions for consumers and SMEs. So let me, and I'm going to use open banking in the UK as an example so let's dive in straight into. So what's open banking? Open banking is effectively data exchange framework. It was mandated by Payment Systems Directive 2, which is a legislation. It's UK plus EU-wide legislation. And its main principle was to make sure that consumers and small businesses are empowered to access the data and payments outside of the walled garden payment banking ecosystem. And as a result, the European and UK banks had to open up the access to the APIs. And let's jump straight into open banking ecosystem in the UK, because that actually sets the scene quite nicely how that whole framework works and who is in charge and what stakeholders are involved. So at the very core of the open banking ecosystem in the UK is Open Banking Implementation Entity. And it's a body that was tasked to set standards and work together with banks, mainly CMA 9. Those are 9 biggest banking groups in the UK, to set up API standards for third-party providers, namely your fintech and technology businesses, to access data and payments rails in a secure, safe, and seamless way. And you might ask, what sorts of API types are covered under open banking? So there are 2 main API types. We have account information services APIs and payment initiation services. When it comes to account information services, those type of APIs allow third-party providers, so the fintechs and the technology businesses, to tap into data that is held by the banks about the customers and businesses they serve. And that type of data might be, for example, bank account ownership data, whose name is on the bank account, if the bank account is owned by a certain business or limited partnership, whatever that is, plus payment routing data, so your sort code and account number, or IBAN when it comes to European banks. Plus, what is quite interesting, it also allows third-party providers to tap into transactional data, which is a quite rich data sets about transactions from consumer and businesses. On the other hand, we have a payment initiation APIs, and those allow fintechs to initiate bank transfer between 2 bank accounts on behalf of the customers, and those customers can be just consumers or businesses. And just moving forward, I think to understand the whole ecosystem, it's worth diving a little bit more into setup and implementation. So in terms of the setup, I mentioned previously that Open Banking Implementation Entity is a private body that was set up by the competition watchdog in the UK. It's funded by the 9 biggest banking groups based here in the UK, and is supervised and overseen by the FCA, which is the financial regulator here in the UK, and the Treasury. And so that is the legal setup and the framework. And when it comes to implementation, the Open Banking Implementation Entity, first when they started, they set up the guidance and they set up the standards of the APIs. And once that was set up, they from the kind of more of a practical point of view, they set up a portal or platform where effectively third-party providers and bank can access and register themselves and onboard with the framework. So just to give you an example, so open banking is a very UK-specific way of implementing the regulation, which is PSD2 regulation. The rest of Europe doesn't have a really centralized entity or centralized body that oversees this. So for instance, as a third-party provider, so my business is a third-party provider, we register with open banking portal, and we dynamically also register, once we onboard it, we dynamically register with all the banks to access the APIs, both the account information services APIs as well as payment APIs. That's not the case in the rest of the European Union. There you need to effectively register with every single bank on the portal and onboard yourself with them. So as you can imagine, as a startup, it saves you a lot of time if you have one centralized way of getting on board with all the banks. Once you've onboarded and you presented your permissions to access the banking APIs, you are issued certificates, and those certificates are used to sign the API request. We have two types of certificates when it comes to open banking in the UK. We have OBIE seal and OBIE QAC certificates. Once you have those, you are ready to access the documentation and start building your APIs. And as you can imagine, the documentation published on the OBIE portal is extremely thorough and quite well, use quite a lot of guides as well, which is non-technical guides for business side of the startup as well. Once you have your product ready, the best way would be to start testing it. And OBIE actually provides you with the secure sandbox environment to start testing your solutions in a secure sandbox environment before you're ready to push it to production. And last but not least, which is quite interesting, and it's also different to what other European countries or European banks are doing, OBIE platform provides or facilitates a communication between banks and the startups, and actually enforces banks and startups to reply to each other within 7 days. So it's actually quite well managed from that side and implementation side. Then we're going into, this is just to give you a bit of a visual aspect. This is open banking platform, and this is developer zone. The platform has different zones for onboarding, reissuing your certificates, and different parts of the business can access different parts of the portal as well. And those are just an example of our own Fena APIs for payments utilizing open banking technology. Now we kind of understand and we set up a scene how the open banking API framework is set up and implemented. We can dive into what sorts of opportunities were unlocked by having quite nicely standardized framework. And just to, so what I've done a little bit, because I think different types of APIs unlocks different opportunities. So I divided the opportunities into related to data access APIs and payment APIs. So data APIs, as I mentioned, so we can access personal data on the bank account, your transactional data. So it's quite a rich set of the data set. And a quite common use case for data APIs is personal finance management apps. And they're kind of the main subcategories within this main category. One is related to aggregation and categorization of the data. So as you can imagine, you can get your incoming transactions from different bank accounts you hold, being current account, savings account, credit cards, all together in one place. And then you can categorize your spending or your income, and then you get a good overview of your financial situation. In the UK, I think there are two kind of main applications utilizing open banking for this use case, and they are Emma and Money Dashboard, worth checking them out. We also have a personalized finance advice. So as you know, if you have so rich data on a transaction level and you know the spend level of the user, you can start helping them setting their saving goals, for example, or investment goals, which is a really common use case for open banking data APIs. Another interesting use case for utilizing data access APIs is lending and credit solutions. And again, we have two subcategories under this main category, namely streamlining loan application. Before open banking, really in the UK, you had to pull your bank statements, you had to pull your payslips and or other financial documents. And what you would normally do, you would send it to your lender via email, which is not the most secure way of sending your important financial documents, or you would send it to the broker and they would forward it to a lender. That kind of has gone away a little bit now with the with open banking. Now we just simply, in a secure way via an API, you pass your transactional data or your income data to a lender that can then analyze it and decide the outcome of your loan application. And one more quite, I think, interesting and unique way of utilizing open banking data access is alternative credit scoring. There's this business called ClearScore in the UK, and outside of just a standard credit scoring, what they do affordability score, and that utilizes transactional income and outgoings data from open banking, and actually gives you a score, what sorts of level of loans or credit cards you can actually afford, which is quite an interesting use case. On the more of a business side, we have accounting and business solutions. So most of the accounting, like a big, well-known accounting solution, will have open banking data feed to the application, where they pull the data from your business or personal bank account, depending what sorts of business you have, or if you're a sole trader. And they will reconcile automatically your transactions, so incoming transaction and outgoing as well. Last but not least, it's worth mentioning the richness of business transactional data can be used for cash flow management and forecasting. And I've got an example here of how actually Fena utilizes account information services APIs. As we mostly serving businesses, we use it for KYC and KYB. Our main product is payments, so we need to run KYC and KYB on all of our customers. So we allow customers to connect the bank account to our software. Then we pull the ownership data from the account. We match it against the records we have for the registered business, and if it matches, we basically approve it automatically for KYB purposes. We also use the same APIs and pull the routing information, so sort code and account number and IBAN to confirm where the money needs to be paid out for payments. And the second part, as I mentioned, the second type of APIs and solutions related to it are payment APIs. And they're mainly useful as an alternative payment method. And there are two subcategories within the open banking payments. There are account-to-account payments, otherwise known as single domestic payments. And those are just one-off transactions that user approved between one bank account to another, that can be used within the e-commerce setup in a checkout. Pay by link is an extremely popular solution used by B2B businesses. And the whole kind of concept is that it actually offers a faster solution when it comes to payouts, as the payouts are instant in the UK, and is a cheaper solution as compared to the card payments. And the second part is recurring payments. There are two types of recurring payments within open banking ecosystem. There are fixed recurring payments utilizing standing orders. You set up a fixed payment in a certain frequency that is collected from your bank account and delivered to another bank account within a day. And there is variable recurring payments, and that is quite a new concept generally in the UK. It was introduced, I think, went live May last year, and it's primarily used for sweeping, so moving funds or money between two bank accounts that belong to the same person or the same entity. So the most common use case for the VRP for sweeping is moving, for example, money on a regular basis between your current bank account, or I think in the US it's called checking bank account, to saving bank account without having to do the strong authentication. So it's automatically pull out. So a good example could be a savings app that have a VRP enable on the application and allows users to move money automatically between two bank accounts to save money on a regular basis. And this is an example of solution built by Fena utilizing payment initiation services APIs. You can see our terminal application on a tablet and a mobile and the bank selection page. And what are my kind of key takeaways when it comes to open banking implementation or implementation of PSD2 legislation within the open banking framework in the UK? And this is my personal opinion, you might disagree with me. I think open banking is most likely the most successful implementation of the PSD2 legislation. And you might ask why. So I know it might be a bit crude way of analyzing it. So in order to access the banking APIs as a technology provider, you need to have a special license. There are two types of licenses. One is account information services license to access the information data, and payment initiation service and provider license to access payments rails data, effectively APIs. And in the UK, we have currently, as of 2 days ago, 227 businesses register actively with the active license. So we can assume that they want to utilize open banking within the solutions. And in the entire EU27, with the population 8 times of the UK population, we have only 213 registered businesses with the active licenses. It shows that if the implementation of the legislation and the API framework is standardized and has one central point of contact in form of a portal, like in the case of open banking and OBIE portal, there's more and more businesses spotting an opportunity to build their own solution on the top of the banking system. And as we are talking about API broadly, this is the key statistics when it comes to API performance of open banking APIs within the UK. The data is quite fresh, it's from July this year. So as you can see, the failure rate is really low, and that is kind of linked to the adoption as well. So I think you can say that success is shown with key KPIs, and number of API calls is probably a good way to show the success. And in the UK, number of payments API calls is growing from month to month and across both type of payments, single domestic payments and variable recurring payments. And this is kind of based a little bit on my analysis of the open banking approach and implementation, as well as kind of thinking about the whole like broader ecosystem and thinking about designing standardized API frameworks. There's a lot of talk about open finance, how to start implementing the idea of open finance. I think there's a key lessons here to be taken from open banking. First and foremost, I think you should have some legal basis for it. So in the UK and Europe, there's PSD2, which sets up quite clearly what this legislation and what those APIs are supposed to do. And that's great, and it's shared between UK and Europe. However, the UK took it a step further with open banking and set up a solid funding for implementation in form, as I mentioned, the 9 biggest banking groups funded the project, and because it had funding, it was the open banking implementation entity was able to hire talent, had enough money for setting a technical infrastructure and putting together OBIE portal, and it was quite useful. It's very difficult. Compare this to the rest EU27. There's no centralized platform. Each bank would have their own API platform, and you can register with every single platform too. Then there was no centralized body issuing the API certificates as well to access or sign the APIs. You need to go to commercial provider and then find the right one and then use those. So it's a lot of things that are done right in the UK as compared to Europe, even though they have the same legislation. Another point that I would like to bring to your attention is the fact that in the UK there was one centralized body, so there was someone in charge, and they were tasked to set up standards. They were tasked to speak to the industry both on the banking side as well on the technology side, and they all brought everyone together to decide on the standards and work together towards implementing the full roadmap of rolling out open banking APIs. And as mentioned before, it's all standardized and it's all kind of links together. And because it's standardized, smaller businesses have much easier time of implementing open banking API versus PSD2 APIs across other countries in the EU. And what I also have done here in this presentation, I've got some additional resources listed here. So if you would like to have a copy of it, please feel free to email me or drop me a line. Also, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'm under Gosia Formanek, the same as on the presentation.